Today I want to show you a few of my capacitor testers, and they range all the way from fairly inexpensive like this one, which was like 50 bucks or less, to that one, which is the peak one that cost me like 100 bucks. And then this is a multi-functional tester, which I'm going to demonstrate as well. And I think this one was like $45 or something like that. And then you can get one of these, which is no longer, I'm sorry, you cannot get this one anymore. The gentleman who designed it and sold it has passed away, but I still have it, and this measures very, very minute, precise amount of capacitance, picofarad, nanofarad, you name it. Why don't I start showing you that there are several different types of capacitors. There are capacitors like these. There are capacitors like these. Okay. And then you have this type of a capacitor. I'm aiming it with my finger. You have electrolytic capacitors, and so is this little one, is also an electrolytic. One way you can tell it's electrolytic, it has a plus and a minus. So this strip, the stripe in here on the side means that that's a negative side, and then therefore the other side is positive. So that would be this one here. So negative and positive. In here, same thing. That's a negative side, so this pin is negative, therefore this pin is positive. Now, how do you use one of these meters? So this particular meter right here, it's MLC 500, and you can get it in a less expensive version for about $15 less, that doesn't have the up and down, which means I can change the frequency it's measuring the capacitor at, and that's very important for some applications. In this case, I'm measuring this large recycled capacitor, and this particular one is 330 microfarad, and it's a 200 volt, so it goes up to 200 volts. And the way you measure it is you start by pushing the power button, and then after, when it says ready to measure, then you zero it out, and then you connect the capacitor. But before you connect any capacitors, you have to discharge them. The easy way to discharge it is just take a screwdriver and put it between the plus and the minus, or on the other types of capacitors like these, if you have the legs long enough, like in this case I had to solder in 2 wires, you just touch it like that and it'll work. I will demonstrate later on today in another video that there is a discharger for capacitors that you can actually get. Now, the next one we're going to show how it measures this one is this one. You just put it in a ZIF socket, and what this is called a ZIF socket. It has this little handle, and then you put the leads in, and then you close it, and then you push this power button, and here it says test, and it says probing, it says capacitor, and it says it's 1114 microfarad. Is it nanofarad? I'm sorry, my eyesight isn't very good. That's the reason I carry when I have done one of these on my head. Anyway, so that's how this particular one measures it. Let's go to the peak. Very good meter. Turns on very, very fast, and you can actually have it hooked up and then power it up with this button right here, and it says 6.92 microfarad, or almost 7,000 nanofarads. So that's what this is. And then if we slide to this very precise one, as I said, I'm sorry you cannot purchase it anymore, but I wish that somebody still produce them. It would be nice. Anyway, you start it without the capacitor connected, And then here's another type of a capacitor. As you can see, that's a little tiny ceramic capacitor, for instance. And then when you measure it in here, it says 909.8 picofarad. So it's a really, really tiny capacitor. So I hope that the lighting is okay on that. The advantage of having one of these is because this meter can measure transistors also, and measure not just capacitors but also diodes and other electronic parts, inductors and resistors, you name it. The one thing you have to pay attention to is that look in the manual, and it explains which each of these pins numbers is. Like for instance, this one here says 1, 2, 3, and then it says 1, 2, 3, and a ground. The ground is not on other models that I have. This is the only one that actually says ground in there. And what you do is you use this when you use diodes. So again, you push the button, it says welcome, and it says probing, and a capacitor, and gives you the value. Okay. So when you're starting in this business as a hobby or as a business, you're gonna of course have to learn what capacitor is and what the capacitor does, and the differences between ceramic and electrolytic and a bunch of other types. But on the beginning, you probably will not care much about if it's a specific capacitor. You're just going to look for its value, and if you have a simple project, usually that will work just fine. So that's all about these little testers that I demonstrated, and I really like all of them. They all have their own place, and that particular meter comes with this little box that has you can actually do infrared, your remote controls, and its codes using this adapter that replaces this part here, which is the ZIF socket. It just unplugs. Since I'm doing it, why don't I just demonstrate it? So it just unplugs just like that, and then you can plug in other things. For instance, this does an infrared, and the reason it has these buttons is because you can actually go up and down and some other things. I don't want to get into details on this one, except this here very quickly, and this is an adapter for surface mount parts that are very, very common in these days. But when you start the hobby like this, you will probably not start with surface mounts, but you're going to start probably with through-hole parts like these, where this goes through the PCB, and then you solder it on the other side, or this capacitor, and so on and so forth. So these are through-hole capacitors, not a surface mount. And since I've been showing this meter here, it came with this little box. I have a little transistor in here. You can test it, and capacitor and a diode, and there's also, this is for calibrating. So it basically just shortens out the pin number 1, 2, 3. And then this here is, if you cannot get to the parts, they are not removed yet, or they have a bigger spread than the ZIF socket, which as you can see, the ZIF socket is pretty narrow, and some parts require to be farther apart like that. So if you don't have long leads, then what you do is you use one of these, and you clip it over here, and that part goes into here where this socket is at. You just plug it in. Okay, so hopefully that will do for now, and I'm going to be recording several videos today, so come back and watch the other videos. Don't forget to put thumbs up, and maybe even say a nice comment or a question.